Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, where in the world today. I am Rabbi Dr. Sophia Catherine Woodley Rothschild, and I have a special guest today, Supervisor Matt Dorsey. Supervisor Matt Dorsey is Supervisor for District 6 Supervisor in San Francisco. And one of his key objectives has been more going too long addressing the issue of public safety in San Francisco. Supervisor, welcome to the show.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Rothschild. It's great to be here.
Okay. So, one of the things that is going on now in San Francisco is the issue of the open air drug market. Could you bring us up to date as to what is being done to address that issue? What legal action police has been planned to deal with?
Yeah. So one thing that I am seeing that is giving me some cause for optimism is there is a level of cooperation among the local government, state government, and federal partners that I have not seen in years past. In some respects, I have to give a lot of credit to Governor Gavin Newsom, who I think was very helpful in lending state resources. But the real hero here, too, is Izzy Ramsey. We have a U.S. attorney who has really prioritized fentanyl trafficking and fentanyl dealing on our streets. I think another hero here is Nancy Pelosi. San Francisco was designated as an Operation Overdrive city, largely because of the advocacy of Speaker Emerita Pelosi. Operation Overdrive is a federal program that supports cities that are seeing fentanyl-related violent crime. Interestingly enough, although San Francisco has a very serious problem with fentanyl, driven crime, including public drug use, public drug dealing, but there's also, an historic level of drug overdose deaths. San Francisco actually didn't qualify for Operation Overdrive because our violent crime problem isn't as bad as other cities. Now, I would argue, and I think Nancy Pelosi argued, that when you're considering the fact that we're losing record numbers of people to drug overdose deaths, it may not be violent, but it is deadly, and it merits federal support. So Nancy Pelosi advocated for San Francisco to get those resources. We got them, and the U.S. attorney is doing a great job of filing cases to get drug dealers off the street.
Okay.
I think we're making progress. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get out of this overnight, but we're seeing progress that is giving me optimism.
Excellent. Yes, I can tell you that there's this well-known statement that when the feds show up, people tend to, beat a hasty retreat.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. In continental topic of public safety, it's not just the open air drug market. It's also the issue of people and many stores have closed, both mom and pop stores and also big box stores, and even now with Macy's closing, stores saying that this is the issue of shoplifting.
Yeah.
Some of it is, I think, based on my experience, has been shoplifting ring, and people are saying that why not prosecute them under the RICO statute? Is that a possibility?
I don't know enough about RICO. I worked in a law office for many years because I worked for 14 years in the city attorney's office. RICO is the Racketeering, Influence, and Corruption Organizations or something
Yes.
that was devised in years past to go after mafia kinds of caliber criminal enterprises. I would accept the perspective of people like Izzy Ramsey about whether that would be appropriate for organized retail theft. I just don't happen to know enough of it, and I don't know that how much of a role the San Francisco Board of Supervisors would play in that. But we need all hands on deck.
Yes,
we are seeing something with fentanyl that has absolutely changed the conversation. We are racing the clock on a drug that is deadlier than anything that we've ever seen.
Okay. How about in the area of many people are saying that with any ramping up of operation should also include the issue of treatment.
Yeah.
What's planned? What are some of the plans going forward?
So I'm going to be an advocate to do anything that we can to expand treatment options and also to support and incentivize recovery. Supervisor Mandelman, I think, has held hearings, and before I made it onto the board, has been doing a lot of great leadership to make sure that we have treatment on demand. I know there has been a lot of frustration that we're really just not living up as a city to the need for treatment on demand. I think much of that isn't even an issue of financial resources as it is staffing resources. We just don't have enough people to fill these roles. And I have heard people who have a lot of expertise in this that we talk about treatment beds. But honestly, if we don't have the support personnel for that, we're just talking about pieces of furniture. We need more people to choose those careers. One thing that I will say that I hope to be working on the Board of Supervisors in years to come is I would like to make sure that we are perhaps engaging with people who are in recovery and who have had success in recovery to support their journeys if they want to continue on to training programs and college degrees that would enable them to be drug treatment counselors. I have been open about the fact that I'm in recovery myself. I have been to, I'm a graduate of 3 different drug treatment programs. I will say from personal experience that the people who are often the best, most effective and influential drug treatment counselors are people who have struggled with addiction themselves. So in some ways, I think that when we talk about people who are using drugs in San Francisco, there is a way of looking at those people as the problem. But I think for many of us in recovery, we also understand that they may be the solution. The best drug counselor in the history of drug counseling may be out there right now using drugs. And we can't give up on those people. They're the hope of the future, and I think for those of us in recovery, I'm one bad decision away from being in a situation like that. Okay. So it's there's a humility that has to go with it, but I think there's also hope that we can get more people to want those kinds of jobs.
Excellent. And in that same vein, there's also been a push to make sure that, like the drug pushers and the drug dealers, that they are held accountable. What are some of the legislative steps are being taken to make sure that the drug dealers and drug pushers are not only are held accountable and for their actions?
I mean, I want to make sure that we are prosecuting drug dealers. We have to be mindful that when San Francisco pursues criminal justice policies that are out of step with surrounding counties or even other major cities in the United States, there is a sort of drug tourism effect that gets created when we make, as a city and county, a unilateral decision that we are going to take all drug dealers and put them into diversion programs and that we're not going to prosecute street-level drug dealing anymore. We're creating a problem by being a soft target for that kind of illegal enterprise. Yeah. At the same time, I'm not really interested in escalating sort of war on drug type kinds of draconian sentences. If we can support people in getting other lines of work or doing other things with their lives, I think that's fine. And I would be in support of that. My biggest concern is when I see surrounding counties and other major cities in the western United States and elsewhere in the United States treating these kinds of crimes more seriously than San Francisco. I have legitimate worries that we are becoming a magnet for drug tourism. And we just saw today Mayor London Breed put out press release that found that significant portions of people who are arrested for public drug use are from out of San Francisco. They're coming here to engage in this behavior, and in many cases, they're also availing themselves of general assistance benefits. And in some cases, some of those folks aren't even from San Francisco. They're living outside of the city, but actually collecting general assistance benefits here. So we have to be mindful of what we're incentivizing, and I'm working on some things that will hopefully do more to disincentivize drug tourism and incentivize treatment and recovery.
Yeah, indeed. Because that's it's becoming a pretty clear problem that you're seeing people you never seen before. They come in and they collect the benefit and they're on the way. And that to me is not doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
But another $1 billion question is the police department in terms of staffing.
Yeah.
What are your plans to make sure the police have all the resources they need, both in manpower and equipment, to deal with the realities on the street?
I mean, right now, the number one public safety challenge that we're facing, in my view, is a level of police understaffing that we have not experienced in San Francisco history. Now, for much of the last 30 years, we had a requirement in the city charter that there be minimum staffing levels of 1,971 police officers. In 1994, voters enacted that charter amendment, which stood for about 25 years. It was repealed, or it was amended in 2020. The reality of that minimum staffing level is we rarely hit it. We rarely got to 1,971 full-duty police officers as the charter required. But now we know in hindsight that that number kept us honest enough, that it was close enough that there was no reason for anybody to sue the city for violating it. In hindsight, we now know that if we had that minimum staffing level, that might have prevented the cliff that we have been going off of since 2020, because right now we're at about 1,400 and change full-duty officers, well below where we would have been. Now, this isn't unique to San Francisco, but San Francisco is, in my view, doing a very poor job of competing with other jurisdictions, especially in Northern California, that are being very aggressive with recruiting bonuses and incentives. The city of Alameda offers a $75,000 recruiting bonus for new hires. It's structured over multiple years. The city of Antioch, which has a number of issues with their police department in addition to police staffing, but they have a $40,000 recruiting bonus plus a $60,000 housing stipend. They are solving their problem with aggressive expenditures of financial incentives. San Francisco is not doing that. And I think when you are a city like San Francisco that has as much of our economy that's invested in being safe and welcoming and clean to commuters, to retail shoppers, to residents, to tourists, to conventions, a city like San Francisco can't afford to not solve our police staffing problem. So that's why that became a priority for me. And much of last year, I worked on a charter amendment. Unfortunately, that was, taken off the rails by an aspiring mayoral candidate. And right now, it's Proposition B. It is political gamesmanship at its worst. Yeah. It's a cop tax scheme, which I could talk about, but I don't know if you want to go down that rabbit hole. In a nutshell, could you give us a synopsis of what that entails? Sure. So I started with a charter amendment last year. I felt it was very important to businesses that are considering their future in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. That we as policymakers do our part to at least have a plan. The reality is we're not going to be able to solve our police staffing crisis overnight. But what we can do is have a plan over a period of time And I worked with the city controller, I worked with the mayor's budget office, and I worked with the city attorney to come up with a 5-year plan that would have minimum staffing levels established back in the charter. They would be graduated from 1,700 in year 1, 1,800 in year 2, 1,900, 2,020, 2,100, so that we would have a fully staffed police department by year 5. Our minimum police staffing level right now, the recommended level is 2,074 officers. Given the rate of attrition, it would probably take us 5 years to get there. I think we can do it responsibly. I think we can do it with existing general fund dollars. Again, I don't think we can afford not to do it with existing general fund dollars. But unfortunately, there were a couple of public sector unions that are competing with the police department for those dollars. And they found a friend in Supervisor Ashasaf Faye, who proposed a poison pill that got through the Board of Supervisors and basically co-opted the charter amendment that I was proposing. Right now, I think it is one of the most absurd and idiotic pieces of legislation that I have seen before voters in more than 30 years. It is enshrining words into the charter that are completely without effect unless and until voters enact a new tax or modify an existing tax for additional revenue in some future election. In my view, this is a legally dubious end run around constitutional restrictions that govern dedicated special tax funding. As somebody who worked in the city attorney's office for 14 years, I will tell you this is risking costly and time-consuming litigation that would risk delaying police staffing for 3 to 5 years. And I'm not making those numbers up. It took 3 years to get through the tax litigation on Proposition C. It took 5 years to get through the litigation on Regional Measure 3, and we can't afford to wait that long. We can't afford litigation that's going to tie up police funding. I think Proposition B would be a disaster for public safety in San Francisco. It worries me a lot that people are confused by what it does, and it's particularly unhelpful that many of the advocates are flat out lying about what Prop B does.
And the sad thing is that if you look, there's been some issues over the years in which certain departments are given like a blank check when they're spending. The money spent on homeless programs have been going up, but the rate of the successes have been going down because the people are saying that a lot of money is going towards the executive positions, while very little goes towards the people who are going to need it, like job creation and building housing. And so, what plans do you have any plans to making sure that the money we spend on homeless programs are spent more effectively?
So I know that Supervisor Stephanie is doing some good work around making sure that money that's expended around nonprofits is something that is audited, and that we have more confidence that we can provide our taxpayers with more information to make sure that their money is being well and wisely spent. I will support that and really appreciate Supervisor Stephanie's leadership on that. We have something playing out now on the Board of Supervisors about the homelessness and supportive housing, and whether we should continue the ability for that agency to have basically an exception to some of the contracting rules. I opposed the extension of that. I was on the losing side. I don't think the agency should be without the accountability that other departments have. And I have a lot of concerns about the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing right now, largely informed by some of the projects that are playing out in my district. I'm not happy with some of the things that department is doing that, in my view, is losing the confidence of San Franciscans. We have to remember that when it comes to homelessness and supportive housing, the reason that agency has a lot of budget to work with is because of the generosity of San Francisco voters, who made a decision with Proposition C that we were going to invest in permanent supportive housing. What I'm seeing right now is there is a lot of things going on out there that it's losing the confidence of San Francisco voters, and we had better be cognizant of that. There's a lot of issues with the neighborhood security, whether some of these projects are going to be responsive, if there's going to be on-site security when things play out. I have one project in my district where there's people who may not be ready for the kind of housing that they have in a residential neighborhood, and there's issues playing out at all hours of the night and day. Residents and neighbors should have some confidence that there is somebody that they can call. Right now, I don't think they have that. So I have a lot of concerns about the department and also some of the nonprofit partners. Again, many of them are struggling with staffing needs too. You know, I think we talk about police staffing. It's worth noting that we are, throughout the labor market and throughout the nation, we are in a demographic decline where the entire workforce is shrinking. We may not see the workforce come back until something like 2040, I think is the, so this is going to be an issue that's with us for a long time. We have more jobs than people right now.
It's interesting that they brought up that point, because then I think about a year and a half ago, about that period, there was an issue of people being paid to walk around and count homeless people, and they were being paid a couple $100, well over $100 an hour to do so.
Huh.
And people were complaining about it, and it was all over Twitter, now known as X, and it was like a laughing stock. You know, people. I think you should, if you I would strongly urge any politician to take a look at it, because it harkens back to the whole issue of there's lots of money being spent and people just wasting it, and it's not going to help the people, but it's only going to, as many people say, the fat cats at the top to grease their wheels. And I think it's harking back to your point that people are losing confidence. San Francisco is a generous city, but people are losing confidence in the way the money is being spent.
Yeah.
And are there going to be any legislative agenda in addressing the issue of waste and fraud within the way on these homeless programs?
So I am going to be supportive of other legislative efforts, and I know that Supervisor Mandelman and, like I said, Supervisor Stephanie, I think, are doing some great work in here. What my legislative focus is going to be, up until now, really, it's been focused on police staffing. That really wasn't, if I'm being honest, I wish that wasn't something I had to work on. It was apparent to me early on my time, in my time on the Board of Supervisors, given the number of phone calls I get from residents and emails from residents that have issues right now, public safety challenges right now, on their street. Probably 90% of the calls and questions that we get involve some kind of an explanation that we don't have enough police to address what you're complaining about. We shouldn't be in that situation. In policymaking terms, the issues that are closest to my heart that I wish I could be working on are things that would support and incentivize recovery. My journey to the Board of Supervisors was unexpected. This wasn't a role that I have been plotting for years. And in fact, I don't think I ever thought I would want this job, let alone have it. The reason that I asked for it was because of my own experience with recovery from addiction and alcoholism that's personal to me. I was working in the police department, and I started there. I was in a civilian command staff role. I started there just a couple of weeks before the COVID emergency started. And there was a meeting that I was in every month, representing the police department with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner and officials from the Department of Public Health. And it was to preview the monthly report on drug overdose deaths. And month after month, I looked at a number knowing that I'm one bad decision away from being in that number. And I felt powerless. I felt helpless. And that was really what made me start thinking that if there was a vacancy in District 6, I might ask the mayor to consider me. Because this drug crisis was twice as deadly as COVID-19. And it felt to me early on, especially in the early COVID days, like nobody was paying attention to it. It was reminiscent of the AIDS crisis, when the stigma of who's dying is masking the horror of how many people are dying. So I was kind of moved to seek this role because I think we have to get the recovery community into the fight. And I think the way that we do that is with incentivizing recovery, supporting it through programs that I'm working on, and including one I have announced, more recovery and sobriety focused housing, doing more to support people to get into recovery, drug treatment, and Narcan. There's a lot of things that we can do that save lives, but ultimately I think I'm a believer that recovery programs are what change lives for the long term, and enable people to turn their lives around and to give back. So I really do think that the recovery community is the secret weapon in the drug crisis we're facing. If we can get them into the game, taxpayers don't pay a dime for it. Yeah. But I know that if I was struggling right now with contemplating a relapse, I could pick up the phone and call any of 100 people, and they're going to be there to help me.
Yeah. In other words, you favor the carrot and the stick approach.
Yeah, but we need more, and it's interesting because that I think is playing out a little bit in Proposition F that the mayor has proposed, that is going to request that people who are availing themselves of general assistance benefits, the CAP program, which is for adults who are in San Francisco or come to San Francisco, who are indigent and need financial assistance. They can get that financial assistance. That's under state law. Mayor Breed is proposing a change to our local law that would require an assessment for substance use disorder. If there's a person believed to be struggling with that, and then a requirement for that person to seek treatment. I am satisfied that there is enough of a stopgap to make sure that we're not unduly forcing people off of benefits, and that there's enough chances that people will have. But I think it is bringing San Francisco into line with what other counties do, including Los Angeles County. We shouldn't be the softest, touch for benefits. We owe that to San Francisco taxpayers. But I think more importantly, we owe it to people who are struggling with substance use disorders not to enable drug-related conduct that right now is deadlier than anything we've ever seen at any time in history because of fentanyl.
Yeah, and that's a very good point you brought up, because people are saying they have no problem paying the tax for it. It's just that they want the money to be spent on actually helping people, and not going towards some fat cat to have their wheels grease, so to speak. Continue on. How about the issue of to address? There's a number of cases of like judges who are just people go for the judge for violent crimes. They're not being held accountable. That they're being just released back on the street. And they commit more crimes. And then a few years ago, there was a case that went viral in which the individual was arrested for violent crime. He gets right back on the street, and voila, he killed somebody. So, is there anything we can do in the regard of, say, propositions to making sure that that the judges and the prosecutors, not so much prosecutors, because we're a new prosecutor, and thank goodness that seem very capable of prosecuting these people. The question is, it sometimes comes down to also the judges who are not being held accountable. So what should we do in that regard?
Well, a lot of legislatively, most of this is in the state realm. The California Penal Code, and this is sort of within the purview of the state legislature. But locally, there are elections if judges are challenged. I have never been somebody who views, judicial races as something. There are some people who just feel that there should never be a judicial challenge. I have not historically been one of those people. I will look at the merits of the people running for judge. I don't think that there's anything sacrosanct about the judicial role. People are signing up for a role that in the democratic process is something that can be subject to a challenge. I know, for example, many years ago there was Judge Ulmer, who I liked and respected, but I also was aware that he was being challenged by Michael Nava, who was a lawyer who I thought was extremely smart and capable, who I actually thought would be better. In a democracy, we get to make decisions about, sometimes it's not, hey, no hard feelings. I just think that Michael Nava would be a better judge. So I supported his challenge to Judge Ulmer. That was ultimately unsuccessful. In the current election, there are two judicial candidates who are challenging sitting judges.
Yes.
I'm very impressed with both of them, and I have endorsed both of them. So I think sometimes that's good for democracy.
Yeah.
That is something that voters have the option to do locally that can make a difference.
Yeah, because there's been some. I think this year is very critical because finally we begin to take a look at some of these judges and say, you know what, this is not working. This is not okay that a violent person has been laid back on the street to commit more crimes. Yeah. And also there's the issue of people who commit these shoplifting robberies. And I keep going back to shoplifting robberies because I was once a part-time loss prevention officer at a couple of stores, and I always used to force to apprehend all of these suspects, and I'll testify against them a couple of times, but it ended up they getting very lenient sentences, and they're not held accountable. And I noticed that in some states where the penalties are stiffer, there's much less shoplifting. Yeah. So at some point, should we take a look at try to get the state to reconsider these penal system like Prop 47?
Yeah, I think so. I know that Prop 47 was something that has been a focus of a lot of issues because there's I think it's $950 people who steal below that. It's only a misdemeanor below a certain amount, and right now I believe it's $950. My understanding of Prop 47 is that the harder issue with Prop 47 is that there is no ability for prosecutors, or at least it's not sufficient, to go after the people who may be coming in under the felony number, but then doing it day after day after day after day. So you're not getting anything that is disincentivizing a criminal enterprise of retail theft. If you're just consistently keeping it below, you can do really well. If you just go from one store to another, keeping your store your incident per incident haul under $950. And right now there's two kinds of retail theft that is playing out, and we saw this actually in some of the news reporting around the closure of Macy's. There's a multitude of factors that's hurting retail right now. But I think we have to be honest that one of those factors is related to criminal justice. One of those factors is related to people not feeling comfortable about coming downtown because of street conditions or drug scenes or other things that we as a city are in control of. There's also things that we're not in control of. The advent of online shopping, Amazon. There's retail. Retail is changing in many ways. I remember when the Westfield Mall opened up in 2006. I was working for the city attorney's office at the time that was actually instrumental in getting the agreement negotiated between the Nordstrom side and the Bloomingdale's side to make sure that they could be one thing, and
Yes.
because it was the Emporium that for years had been shuttered, while the Nordstrom Mall was open. So there was a process that got that whole thing opened. But I remember even in 2006, there was speculation about whether this might be too big of a mall, given the amount of outdoor retail at nearby Union Square, and did we really need a mall this big? I think it was the biggest mall west of the Mississippi, as I recall. So a lot of these things are playing out right now. It's almost a perfect storm. But there are issues here that involve retail theft. Some of it is addiction-driven retail theft. I think that was the thing that was really driving the closure of the Whole Foods at
Yes.
Mission and 8th.
And that was so sad.
And then there's also more orchestrated, organized retail theft. And I think that is something that Prop 47 has enabled, because prosecutors don't have the tools to make sure that we can have the repeat offenders evading those consequences.
Yeah, indeed. And there has been some rumblings about trying to repeal Prop 47. Do you think that's possible?
I do, and I actually think. I know the legislature has been. It seems to me that the legislature has been hesitant to take that up. Where I think the conversation is changing is that I know that the mayor of San Diego, Mayor Breed from San Francisco, has endorsed this. I believe that the mayor of San Jose may also have endorsed making changes to Prop 47. I would also, I'd have to look at the specific before I make a decision on whether and what I will endorse. But I'm certainly open to it as a downtown supervisor who represents a lot of retail establishments. So when you have leaders of cities that are deciding that we need to take a second look at Prop 47, I think it's game over. It's not like it's going to get, the rural counties are going to be.
I guess that's
So I actually think that we are probably we're having a conversation now that I think we will see progress on in the next couple of years.
Definitely, and that's a very good thing. As we say, hope springs eternal,
Yeah.
and we can as a person who also owns a business aside, well, it's clearly something that has to be addressed going forward.
It does. There is a part of this. I live at on Mission Street between 7th and 8th.
Mm-hmm.
And there is one thing that's sort of this overarching public safety narrative that I think those of us who care about government have to be cognizant of. I'm a liberal Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in what good government can accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, somebody who's ever going to complain about high taxes. I don't mind paying high taxes, and I'm not going to advocate for tax cuts. But I think it's important for those of us who are liberal Democrats, who want government to work, to make to do more to assure those of us who are the taxpayers we're serving that we're doing a good job with their money.
Yeah.
And I worry a lot about what is playing out right now around public safety and the extent to which it's delegitimizing government. I had a person stop me the day of Gay Pride last year, and he recognized me, and he was mad as hell, and he came up and he said, "Supervisor, I just got cited for having an open container of beer." And he pointed down the corner to 7th and Mission, and he said, where the drug scene was. And he said, "Look at that." He said, I'm the guy your police department is enforcing against. And what are you doing about that? When people see laws being violated with impunity, whether it's retail theft, behavioral health issues, street conditions, and yet they're getting tickets if they're parked in the wrong spot. The government is doing a good job enforcing some things.
The idea of being nickel and dime to that.
Yeah, but it has the effect of delegitimizing government. And those of us who are responsible for governing have to be cognizant of that. It's kind of gets back to the point that I was talking about with permanent supportive housing. The way that a democracy is supposed to work is we got to be accountable to the residents because it's their money.
Indeed.
And if we fail them, they're going to take it back.
Yeah.
So it worries me.
Speaking of money and public money, in this Utah, which is a red state, clear that labor, they had a homeless problem. And what they did was they said, well, they built housing, they put the people in the housing, those that needed jobs, they gave them jobs, those that needed mental issues, they had social workers on site to help them. And they basically fixed their problem. And people are saying, why not San Francisco? Why can't San Francisco do that?
I would have to look at Utah. I know it sounds to me like it's a housing first model.
Yeah.
Housing first is a concept that was pioneered in Finland. I think it has shown good success. I think that's probably what Utah is doing. The idea is to get people into housing, and then we can better address other things. One thing that I have seen play out with that is it's a little bit more complicated in a city like San Francisco, in large part. And by the way, it was interesting because I reached out to the consulate of Finland to engage on this. I wanted to learn more about how their housing first works in Finland. The Nordic countries are much better served with social programs than American cities or the United States. They are legitimate welfare states. I will say I would support that in the United States. We are kind of I think the term in political science is called a residual welfare state or something. We have features of it, but we really don't have the kind of safety net that many progressive European cities and European countries have. So they can do housing first with effect because they have the resources to bring to bear in terms of social services. Utah may have that as well. Right now, I think what we're struggling with in San Francisco is there's too much demand and not enough resources financially and in terms of the people who can do these jobs to meet the demand. And one other thing is that we also get back to a situation where at the city level, sometimes when we try to solve problems, we end up creating bigger problems because now people are coming here for the services.
That's a very good point. And once again, in closing, what would you say to individuals in San Francisco who seem bent on stifling any attempt to move the public safety issue forward?
I think voters want change on public safety. I think they're tired of obstacles. I would say that on Proposition B, for example, there's a lot of confusion about it. I may well lose this. I'm doing everything I can to campaign to defeat Proposition B. The support that I'm seeing from voters tends to be rooted in a complete misunderstanding of what it does. When I explain to people that it's requiring a new tax in order to have even minimum police staffing levels, people are really angry. And I think we as a city are in the midst of a voter revolt on public safety. In many ways, this is what led to the recall of Chesapeake.
Yes.
I think it led to the election of many people, including myself. And I think we're going to see it play out in at least the next election or two.
Yes.
I think there is a big tent that this sort of abandonment of police staffing and just the public safety basics, where there has been policy choices that we're going to defund and dismantle much of this, that is right now not going over well with voters. And I think people are seeing what happens when we're in a situation, as we are now, that 1/3 of the police department we're supposed to have isn't there. And what's more difficult, I think, for me to get my head around is there's another 300 police officers right now who are eligible for full retirement, and they could walk out the door. And if we don't do more and more aggressively and more effectively to address that, we're going to have a hard time fixing anything.
Yeah, because if these 300 retire, then that means less police in the street.
Yeah.
And that means people are not going to feel safe, businesses are going to continue to close, people are going to continue to leave, and there goes your tax base, and the whole thing implode. So public safety is critical.
Yeah.
And with that, thank you very much,
Okay.
Supervisor Matt Dorsey, as always, and it's been a remarkable pleasure.
Great. Thanks so much.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Great.